Hi, this is Sierra Dahl. Welcome to the Get Real, How to Live a More Authentic Life podcast with Dr. Barry Weinhold. Dr. Barry is living proof that it's possible to overcome a traumatic childhood and move forward and have a successful, happy, and self-aware life. As a result of his experiences, he's devoted the past 45 years as a therapist, university professor, and author of over 80 books to develop cutting-edge approaches that can show you how to achieve the life that you want. We'd like to hear from you. So send us your stories and your questions, and Dr. Barry may feature you on a future podcast. If you subscribe to the podcast, you'll receive a free self-assessment tool that will help you evaluate how you might be able to move your life forward more effectively. Now here's Dr. Barry. So Dr. Barry, today you said you want to talk about your book, What is Your PsyQ? Increasing Your Psychological Intelligence Through Self-Therapy. So tell us what that's all about.
Well, this book came out of a bunch of things that happened to me, and I think I'll share that because it kind of indicates what the book's about, why I wrote the book. I often have a purpose for writing a book. You know, something will happen, and I'll say, "Oh, I've got to write about that," and so then I do. And so that's what happened with this book. It was July 4th, 2022. And I had some clients actually, since I have international clients and July 4th isn't a holiday everywhere. And I had some clients, and then I had one cancel on me. So I went out and looked at TV. I thought I'll just sit and take an hour, I have an hour in between clients here. I'll just catch up on the news and relax a little bit. So I went on and turned on CNN. And lo and behold, they're reporting another mass shooting. This time it was in Illinois at Oak Park, I believe it was, which I have some people who live there that I know, friends, and they've described that as the safest place to live in the country. And now they had a parade, and some idiot shot up the people at the parade, and that upset me, because I had a personal connection, first of all, with the community. And I had the same reaction when we had a shooting here in Colorado Springs. It was like, what do we need to do to prevent that here from happening? So I got upset about it, because I said, every time I turn on TV is another mass shooting. I'm tired of it. I'm sick of it. And I started pacing. Saying some unpleasant things, you know. And then I thought, wait a minute, Barry, you're getting too upset about trigger. You're getting too upset about this. What's that about? Well, it was that sense that Robert in the last episode talked about a sense of helplessness. I didn't know what to do. I knew that things had broken down. That this fellow had been treated by the mental health system and released, and then he went and killed all these people. So I said, the whole mental health system is broken. If it can't stop a mass shooter, even though they've had an opportunity through therapy to learn about that, why is it that? And I went back in my memory about the guy that shot up the theater in Aurora, Colorado, James Holmes. And he had like, I don't know how many sessions of therapy with a psychiatrist. And yet she was unable to determine how dangerous he was. And the same is true with this guy in Maine. He had 2 weeks of mental health treatment. I mean, that's pretty unusual. And yet, in that 2 weeks, I don't know what they did with him, but they never found out why or what was going on and what was triggering him. And then I began to see that, you know, when somebody looks dangerous, and sometimes they'll put them on what is called a 72-hour hold, which allows them legally to hospitalize them and be interviewed and determine how dangerous they are to themselves and other people. Well, I said, they did that. And they didn't find that this man was dangerous. They didn't find that James Holmes was dangerous. How many times do we have to have mass shooters who have mental health problems, who go to mental health facilities to get the problem solved, and they don't? And then they end up killing somebody. So that was a part of, I said, well, the only thing I can really do is write a book about it, and write a book about helping people with their triggers and helping people with learning to become more psychologically intelligent. And that's one of the themes of the book. Is the subtitle is how to increase your psychological intelligence, and the title is what is your PsyQ, instead of just your IQ, your psychological quotient. So that was one of the reasons I wrote the book, and the other one was, the fact that I felt so helpless to do anything when I saw these pictures of these crowds in Oak Park, Illinois, getting shot at by, and they were just attending a parade, a 4th of July parade. And I thought, well, what does this country come to that happens? And yet we need to put in place some things that would prevent that from happening. So I don't have the power to put any of those in place, but I do have a power to write a book to help educate people on what might be necessary to think about and do if you're triggered, and if you have psychological episodes where you feel out of sorts.
You want to explain to us what you mean by psychological intelligence?
Yeah. Well, thanks for that question. I was about to do that. And it means that people are able to understand why they do what they do, why they think what they think, and why they feel what they feel. And unfortunately, most people don't have very high intelligence when it comes to that. They have no way of knowing why they're doing what they're doing. And then there's another layer under that, which is about what beliefs do you have that might be causing you to behave this way. And so I saw that that basically it's not rocket science. There's just some things that you need to know about your behavior. And one of them, well, I'll talk more next episode about this one when we talk about people pleasing. But one of them was kind of an idea that people who have low psychological intelligence make bad decisions. Now, you heard Robert talk about in the last episode about the list of things that he's changed in his life, like 20 things he's changed, including making better decisions. And that's what one of the outcomes I was hoping for in the book is that people, in reading it, getting more psychologically intelligent, knowing more about why they do what they do and say what they say and feel what they feel, that they'd make better decisions. Does that
makes a lot of sense? Yeah. And yeah. I think you're right. A lot of people are totally not aware of why they do what they do. And that's a very important part. So how is your book structured? How are you doing?
It's structured in an interesting way. It's the most complex book I've ever written to start with, because it has 30 or 40 some chapters, and 36 of those are keyed to a self-quiz at the beginning of the book, which the reader takes and scores. And it's 36 items that all are connected with living a more authentic life. These are things, if you want to live a more authentic life, these are the things you have to do. And so the 36 things that I had on the list, then each of those became a chapter in the book. And then each chapter in the book had a chapter in an online workbook with more resources about that issue, about how to improve that in your life. So there's a ton of information in there. The book itself is 280 pages, and the workshop, the online workbook is over 200 pages. That's a lot of content in there. But I felt that it was necessary to do it that way. And then when somebody picks up the book and reads it, and they take that self quiz in the first chapter, then they're asked to score it. And when they take it, they're supposed to look at the item and decide how much of that item have they already mastered or do. In other words, it was a kind of a way of from 1 to 10, meaning 10 I mastered that, and 1 I don't know much about it. So then I said, if you have scores on this self quiz that are 5 or below, 10 being the highest, those are the chapters you go to first to work on, because those are the areas where you have the most efficiency. So everybody is going to, basically read this book and do what they need to do, and it won't be the same. Everyone will be different in the sense that they will have picked out the areas of their life that they now know they need to work on in order to be more authentic.
You want to give us an idea of what some of the areas are that you're talking about?
Yeah, well, the first one is show up and tell your truth. And this is a big one. And that's why it's number 1 on the list, because I feel that when people are able to do that with them, also with themselves, but also with other people, but showing up is like 95 or 99% of the issue of just being able to be present with people and to show up in their lives in meaningful ways, and then to be able to tell your truth and not have to feel.
Why do you think people don't show up?
Well, I'm going to be talking next episode after this one about people pleasing, and that's a big one. They don't show up because they don't have a strong enough self to stand up for themselves, and then they give in and do what they think other people want them to do, and they people please. I'm a classic example of a people pleaser. I've done it all my life, and I've been working on getting free of it, and I'll be talking more about that in the next episode. But just to bring it in right now, it's important because, and then the book itself will prepare you, even if you, I say in the subtitle about learning to be a self-therapist as well. And that's the second objective of the book. I don't think that it's necessary for everybody to go to therapy to change their life. I think you can do it in a book such as this one. It can contribute to changing your life. And if it can wake you up to the need for therapy. By getting more psychologically intelligent, you then also become a better client when you get into therapy. You know much more about what you do, what you want from the therapy, and you know how to ask for what you want to get that.
Well, you're talking about leading a more authentic life. What does that mean?
Well, it means more about having a fully functioning self. And you'd think that would not be a big deal, but my research shows that about only 5% of adults have a fully functioning self. And I'll say more about that the next episode, about why I say that. But that's basically how I look at the fact that you can't be authentic if you're still trying to build a self. And developmentally, there are markers and there are milestones in terms of that process that I'll share with you, and why in the next episode I'll share with the audience about why that figure of 5% is probably pretty accurate with people being authentic most of the time. Obviously there are times when we're authentic and times we're not. And sometimes I'll ask my clients, well, what percentage of the time do you think you're authentic, and what percentage of the time do you think you're not? And give me a subjective answer on that. And so if I ask you that question, what would you answer?
Well, I think there's been very hard for me to be authentic. It's taken years because there's a lot of fear involved if you ask for what you want, or if you actually are yourself. are you going to get rejected for that?
Yeah.
And it's really hard to overcome that. So I've come a long ways. I certainly wasn't that way years ago. I was more authoritarian because I was too afraid of allowing somebody else into my life and being equal with them and asking for what I wanted. I was more demanding, and now I've got to a point where I realize that is not a good way to go through life with your partner or other people, and you have to be more open and honest with yourself and not be afraid. There's a lot of fear to overcome. So how do you see people getting past that kind
Well,
of?
certainly they need to be aware that their psychological intelligence is low. And that's maybe the first step, getting some self-awareness that, boy, I don't know what's going on with me and why I do what I do, why I say what I do, and what I feel. I'm confused, and I end up making bad decisions, and my relationships fail, and so it goes on with that. But I don't know if that's an answer to your question. But
Do you think your quizzes help people become more aware of themselves?
absolutely, absolutely. There's strong evidence that these self quizzes sort of joggle people's memories and their minds, and they think about themselves in different ways. And when I work with clients, I typically will use the self quizzes as a guide to work with them, and I'll take the items on the self quizzes that they scored. It's a 4-point scale, for one being hardly ever that shows up, 2 is sometimes, and then 3 is usually, and 4 is almost all the time. Well, there's not much difference between usually and almost all the time. And so I look at the 3s and 4s on their inventory. And then we go through a process, which is in the book, of constructing whatever is connected to that and constructing something new. And here's the 4-step process very quickly. I start, if it's something about like one of the questions on the people pleaser is, I can't say no even when I want to. And then we look at, well, how does that affect your life today? Do you see that as interfering with you, moving forward on your life and having a happier, more authentic life? And if they say, yeah, then we say, okay, well, let's go back and find out where that started, where that came from. And then step 2 is locating whatever content from your past is unfinished that is showing up in present time, and that you find by paying attention to the things that trigger you. And so then once you've done that, then it's okay, well, what was missing then that made that not turn out the way it should have? And if that were present, could it have turned out better? Very typically what's missing is people will say, I didn't have a voice. I did not have a voice in what was happening. And that's the key missing piece often for people. And then I say, okay, what can you do now to regain your voice? I worked with Joyce Aubrey, who has a group of surviving, mostly sexual survivors, that she meets with. And the title of the group is Finding Your Voice. And I gave her an award once, and there were about 20 of her students there that are working with her. And after I finished my introduction, I said, well, tell me about what Joyce has done in your life, how she's helped you. One by one, they stood up and told their story. It was I was in tears, and so was everybody in the room. It's so powerful to hear people finally get their voice and be able to articulate their story. That's so important, Sierra.
Yes, I can imagine it is.
I get kind of teary thinking about the fact that there's so many people who aren't able to do that. And it isn't that hard to learn how to do that. So that's what I'm hoping the book will do. It'll provide a stimulus for people to work on themselves, get more self-aware, get more, be able to reflect more accurately on what's going on and what happened to them in the past. I mean, if you just understand the fact that the natural learning style of human beings is to repeat everything that whatever happened well, we repeat anything that didn't get finished, basically, because the objective we have as human beings is to wrap things up and put a bow on them and understand them and make them finished. But if that doesn't happen, they keep showing up. And it's like your body saying, hey, pay attention to me, pay attention to me. I'm going to trigger you until you do. and if people just do the typical things, they'll never learn that lesson.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense.
So you've read most of the book. What have you gotten out of it?
Well, I've been through therapy before, and I have read a lot of books, but I will say this is probably the most comprehensive book I've read as far as tackling all the different issues that people might have and looking at how you are involved in that yourself and what you have done in your life. And I thought I was pretty clear on a lot of things, but as I read through some of these different checklists, I realized, I'm still doing that. So I didn't even know I was still doing that, but there I am. So I think it's extremely helpful to be able to see yourself in a different way and to look at things you may never have thought about before and your behavior and how you move through life. So yes, it's an excellent book. It's probably the best one I've ever read on
And
therapy.
almost each chapter has a case example of how somebody applied that specific topic to their life and what they did with it.
Yeah, it's extremely helpful, and there's a lot of helpful ideas on how to overcome some of these issues as well.
So that's my contribution to mass shooters and all domestic violence and child abuse that happens because people get triggered. If they understood their psychological process and understood why they get triggered so often and what to do about it, I think we'd have less violence in the world. That's my goal, is to help people, instead of acting out violently, to reflect and take emotional ownership for whatever is going on, not trying to blame other people or avoid it and try to just stay in your comfort zone. So that's
so passionate about your work and helping people, and that sure shows in who you are and how you go through life. So,
and you can order this book through Barnes and Noble Press. That's an online bookstore, and they have it as an ebook and as a paperback on their website. You can also call a local brick and mortar Barnes and Noble store and have them order it for you. So, and then it's available on our website. Well, the website takes you right to Barnes and Noble Press, so with a link. So you can go on the website, press the link, and you'll be right on the Barnes and Noble website to order it. So it's very easy to order.
Okay, that's good to know.
And basically, it's probably the most powerful self-help tool I've ever created. And I don't know, I almost think I'm going to stop here and not write any more books. This one's so good, I don't think I ever get anything any better than this. And every book I write, I think, oh, this is the best one I've ever written. But after 80 books, I think I've written enough, and I'm going to try some other things like webinars and online courses and trying to reach people in different ways than just reading a book. But right now, my main way of reaching the general public is through this podcast and through my books and my website. So
Your passion is making a difference. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I'm passionate about my work. I'm passionate about a lot of things in life. I just am. I fully embrace life. in its best and its worst. And I just find that if I'm able to do that, I'm much happier and much more content. But it's a struggle.
Yes, it's very hard to watch some of the things that are going on, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And like you said, not being able to directly do anything about it, but hopefully this book will help some people see more about their lives and be able to make changes and understand where they're coming from and why they do what they do.
And I try to make it as practical and usable as possible. So it isn't filled with a lot of psychological jargon. It's filled with a lot of facts and about self-help tools and different things that are very user-friendly, if you wish. So listen, we probably run out of time for today, and I've said about all I want to say about the book. So I'll quit.
So what's next?
Well, I'm going to dig into one of the other, actually, it's what I mentioned earlier about the number one item on the self-quiz is show up and tell your truth. And I'm going to talk about what happens when you don't, and find out how many people out here identify as being a people pleaser. I sure did. And I'll talk about my story in the next episode as well.
That sounds really important. Sounds like a really good topic. I think a lot of people can identify with that.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we'll see you all next time.
See you next week. Right. Bye-bye.
Therapy turned my life around. I was able to face my fears, identify some of the beliefs that were holding me back, and start actually living my life. If Dr. Berry's latest book, What is Your PsyQ, had been available, I would have had a better understanding about myself before I saw my therapist, or I may not have needed therapy at all. I recommend this book if you'd like to identify and rethink the past beliefs that are affecting your life. This book is available at cicrcl.org. Don't forget to subscribe to Dr. Berry's podcast and receive self-assessment tools. This is Sierra Dahl and Dr. Berry. We're looking forward to seeing you next time.